Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. I'm Mark Stein, Thrive founder and your podcast host. We're creating sustainable, inclusive, and multi-generational residential communities from repurposed big box stores or other unused buildings. By offering unique and ecological co-living options, our aim is to combat the epidemic of isolation, revitalize communities, and help others discover the many benefits of engaged community living. In this podcast series, join us as we discuss co-living and other aspects of our concept, in addition to bringing you interesting people who are doing cool things from around the world. Through this podcast, learn more about our concept and see how Thrive co-living communities will bring together people from all walks of life. To find more about us, visit www.thrivecolivingcommunities.org. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. So hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. Glad to have you back. And I'm pleased to welcome Don Odom, who is a business coach out of Louisville, Kentucky, or as the natives call it, Louisville, Kentucky.
Right.
I've lived there for about 40 years, and I never could force myself to say Louisville to anyone who wasn't local. So, Don, welcome, and glad to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm glad to be with you here today. And yeah, it is funny if you look at our Chamber of Commerce. I think there's about 14 different ways you can say Louisville. So there's a whole host of ways to say it. But for those folks who know Louisville, it's a great place to live. So.
And you always know, if you're talking to someone who's not from there, you always know if they have connections by the way they say it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Or
exactly
if they've been
right.
there. So you're a business coach, and let's start out by talking about why someone would want to hire a business coach, and at what point in their business journey is an ideal point or the ideal point.
Yeah. I think it's going to vary by person, Mark. One of the things that we're going to get into is, my background in psychology. And that, tends to drive people, different personalities types and so forth in different directions. But by and large, from my experience, when a person really is hitting a sticking point in their business, meaning that they have put a lot of effort in, a lot of hours in, a lot of energy in, and they, no matter what they're doing, isn't getting them the results they want, whether it's growing the business to the next level, whether it's achieving a certain mile mark, whether it's expanding the team, even getting into a different location. And so usually the trigger event for most business owners is after a period of really putting their nose to the grindstone and trying everything that they know how to try, then they kind of looked and say, okay, what other options are available for me? Again, that's the majority. Not everybody's put together that way. There are certain business owners that say, look, I understand hiring expertise is the fastest way to the finish line, to success. And so when they engage, when they encounter a challenge, they look to engage somebody that can get them past that hurdle fast. But the vast majority of business owners that I've worked with, and again, that business owner range for me is 10 to 20 employees by and large. Obviously, I've worked with a number of solopreneurs too that are building their company up to have employees. But in that range, they're usually folks that are going to try to figure it out on their own, because that's their style, right? They've grown up figuring things out on their own, being a little smarter than everybody else in the room, or being willing to work harder. And what they find is in these challenges that they need help on, that no matter what tools, no matter what actions, no matter what thought processes they've used in the past that have been successful, those aren't working for them. And that's when the time is for them to look outside for help and to get assistance.
And I don't mention my day job very often, but as a marketer, I certainly find this phenomenon. And it seems like in order for really anything to work, but especially something in business, every piece of the puzzle has to be in place. And
Yeah.
if there's one piece of the puzzle that's missing, then the whole thing does not work. So they're missing a piece, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
and they need to figure out what that is.
Well, it's really interesting you say that because, my history, I've been doing this now. I've owned 4 different businesses, and I've owned this business now coming up on 10 years. And when I started this business, I really started more in the sales line. I was really positioned myself as a sales coach, and I had a process that had worked for me, and I taught business owners that. And what was really interesting to me is that as I was going through that, there were successes there, but there oftentimes it was like, okay, now that I've got my sales process going, I need to talk to you about this. And this could be operations, this could be building a team, this could be process, this could be consistent delivery and customer service, right? And there was always one more thing. And so you're right on point with that the idea or another situation that leads to needing a coach is this idea that, hey, I can fix one aspect or one component of my business, and then it's clear sailing. And the reality of it is that all of these pieces, there's 5 core pieces to a business. All of them are interrelated to one another and interdependent. And so it's the old stool example, right? You got a 4-legged stool and one of the legs is missing or short, you're not going to have stability there. And that's exactly what happens with business owners. They try to fix what they think is the major piece, and they may have some improvement in that, but that piece is not a standalone piece. And so its interdependence then is going to shine a light on the other areas of the business that may be weak or underperforming that they need to do something about. So that's why a lot of business owners feel like managing the business is always kind of this act of plate spinning. You got to get this one going and that one going, and it's hard to kind of balance them all out. And so as a result of that, what I did is I moved my practice to really coaching on the entire business. And so today, the process that I go through is really a process of how to manage and grow your entire business so that you don't keep kind of running back and forth to this place. I got this fixed, now that's area is down. I got to fix this area, but now I got this area up, the other area is down. We tackle this all in one place and give business owners a platform to manage everything so they can have consistency and they can have growth, but more importantly or just as important, they have control and they have free time to enjoy it. If you're constantly trying to plug the holes in the dike because you don't have an overall plan, then business ownership becomes very cumbersome and tiresome. But if you have an organized plan, you really have a pathway to get to the next level. And the next level for me is consistency, is profitability, is time for business owners to really enjoy what they built.
Another metaphor I like is for business owners is herding cats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we get too far, let's share a commonality that we have that this is related to your background in the hotel hospitality business.
All right.
So share that, and then I'll piggyback.
Okay.
So we found this out in a networking meeting that we had.
Yeah. So I really got my start in small business as a part of my family. In the late 80s and 90s, as I was going through, high school, my dad was purchasing hotels on Panama City Beach, Florida. And so we got to the point where we had 3 at one point. And at age 15, 16, I was running one of those hotels, which is every aspect from the cleaning of the rooms to the checking in of people to the keeping the books for reservations to managing the pool to doing hospitality. So it was really a baptism by fire, but I learned a lot. And that's really what got me into small business. And it's just, I've only had one job that's outside of small business, things I've done for myself. And I was a fish out of water there. I just didn't fit. And so I've been married now for, coming up on 22 years. And I told my wife early on, one thing you have to understand about me is I'm basically unemployable. And so I'm going to have to do something on my own. And it gets back to what I was explaining earlier, is that most business owners have this can-do attitude. We can do it as good or better than anybody else, and we're going to show you. And so that was a great start for me. A lot of great memories from obviously from Panama City Beach itself, but also from interacting with people, and the business lessons were just phenomenal there. Things you can't learn in school, you have to just learn, on the job.
And so the commonality that came up was he mentioned the name of this hotel,
Oh yeah, Driftwood
motel,
Lodge.
which was a driftwood
Yeah,
motel, and my eyes and ears shot up, and that was the motel that I'm originally from Columbus, Georgia, and we vacationed in Panama City Beach because that was the closest beach, and that was the hotel or motel that we
yeah,
stayed in when I was a small child, from about 3 or 4
yeah.
to probably 8 or 10, maybe a little
Wow.
older. So I have such fond memories of
Yeah.
that motel. I think it's been torn down.
No, no, it's still
No?
there.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
In fact, beside it, they built I think it's about a 10-story hotel. It's called the Osprey. That may be what you're thinking, because there was a lot of construction around it at that point. And on the other side, they've done some construction. In fact, if you haven't been to Panama City Beach in the last 15 years, you won't recognize it. It's really commercialized there, a lot of high rises. It's not the mom and pops that used to, dot the beach like it was. It's really these high rise condos now. Very nice, but different.
And so we'll leave the subject in a moment, but I remember I had my first camera on vacation there. I
Mhm.
must have been 6 or 7. The little box cameras. I think it was called a Brownie.
Okay.
And I'm a little older than you are.
Yeah.
And I took my first roll of film, and at that time it probably cost $8 to develop a roll of film.
Yeah.
And I took a picture of the driftwood sign, the lounge chairs, the pool, no humans, except maybe a woman in a bathing suit or something.
There you go.
And my mom was furious at me for 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 taking up that kind of money. Anyway, so fond memories and a good connection for us.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
let's get back to coaching.
All right.
So from knowing you, I understand that you have a different approach to coaching than you find with most business coaches. So talk a little bit about the standard, what we might call a standard approach. That's probably not fair, but distinguish your approach
Yeah.
from what's common with business coaches.
So to introduce this, I think a little background story is in order. And so, as I mentioned early on, I've owned 4 businesses. And up until maybe about 8 years ago, if you knew me, then you knew my style of business was work my tail off, put in a bunch of hours, and stress out. And that's common for a lot of business owners. There's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, that comes along with business ownership. But my wife had gotten to the point where she's like, look, you're kind of killing yourself, and seem like you're not very happy. And so we really, you're doing this thing so that you can enjoy your life, not so that you can basically work yourself to death and be miserable. And so she's a therapist. And so she sent me to this gentleman. His name is Van Joins, and he operates a clinic in South Carolina, or North Carolina rather. And I went to a personal growth marathon weekend. And what that really entailed was understanding my personality style and the components of my personality, and how those things show up in my personality that can both help me and hurt me. And I don't know if you've ever had the occasion when you go to one of those like workshops or events like that, and the speaker's talking, you feel like they're speaking directly to you. It becomes uncomfortable. And that was exactly what this weekend was about for me. And it was so eye-opening for me, and it was so life-changing for me, that it really inspired me, because the change was at least the initial change was pretty much instantaneous for me. I understood what he was saying. I saw how it was a detriment to me, and I began immediately working on changing the way I was interacting. And what I mean by that is I had bought into kind of the traditional views of what success was as a business owner: go getter, don't take no for an answer, keep charging hard, that sort of thing. And where I thought that that was helping me, what I understood was is that wasn't coming across in the best light to others, and it was impacting my business. And so that was really eye-opening for me, because we are who we are, Mark. But without awareness, we can do things that really work against us. And so I started studying. It's a arm of psychology. It's transactional analysis psychology. And basically what it means is just how we interact with one another, and then what's going on psychologically behind those interactions. And I started studying that because, as I said, we are who we are. And what that means is the way that you interact with the world shows up in the way you interact with your business. Not only in the relationship you have with the business, but the relationship you have with the people in and around your business. And so you can do things that you believe are on point to help you that could be working against you, or you could do things that you have zero awareness of, and they show up because you keep coming back to the same problem, the same challenges, the same irritations, the same frustrations. And that's usually a really good point, that you're doing things outside your awareness that are really holding you back, standing in your way. And so I've continued to study that. In fact, I'm a practitioner now. And so I roll that into my coaching, because small business is so personal, right? Your business is your life, and your life is your business. And in that context, more times than not, the business is a direct reflection of the owner, their thoughts, their actions, their activities, and so forth, and their beliefs. And so if you are doing things that you don't know that you're doing, or you're doing things that you believe are helpful that aren't, you can work your tail off but not get the results you want. And so because there's such a close interaction between small business results and the owner, you have to really, at least in my way of thinking, you have to make that a part of the calculus on how to improve. And so part of what I do is not only coach an entire system for managing the business, but I also coach a process on how to elevate your awareness so that you can elevate your leadership and your effectiveness and your impact. And the upshot of that is you improve your relationship with your business, you improve your relationship with those in and around it, and honestly, you improve your relationship with your family members, because they're such a big part of your success. And so instead of pushing people away, or maybe even going in, or maybe overreacting, what you do is begin to be aware of how you do those things, and you begin to implement changes that work for you instead of against you. And so I don't know of anybody else that's doing it in that way. The psychology part of it. There's things in there about leadership and inner game, but really breaking down your personality and what your drivers are and how those show up in your life, and then game plans and structures for how to make the most of them. That's all a part of what I do.
I would imagine that it's really interesting. I would imagine that as you're dealing with a new client, that those personality traits start to come out in their interaction with you. Absolutely. And that's how you recognize things. If they interrupt you, certain mannerisms that they might have that tips you on what these issues are. Is that what happens?
Well, it's twofold. That's part of what happens, but I also, because I've incorporated this, I have an assessment that I take that's more psychology based, rather than like the business based ones where they tell you your personality, you're either a go-getter or you're people person or whatever. This is really more clinical, and what I'm able to do in that then is connect that into their personality, because also as a part of this, I've ventured off and studied personality styles in the transactional analysis environment. And so there are drivers to our personalities, there are components that make up the basic personality. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking out for those, and then I'm pointing those out to a person and say, hey, when you're doing this, what is the aim? And let me tell you how that's likely coming across. Or I'm seeing that maybe when we talk about, game plans or actions, I'm seeing you tell me that you're going to do it, but then you go back and you think on it for a while. And so these are all different type of personality traits, and pointing those things out and how they really are creating challenges or hurdles for you is real eye-opening for folks. because that's really from a psychology standpoint, they've learned how to interact with the world and survive. And what we do is we stay kind of in that operating process in every aspect of life that we do. But once you understand that, hey, the way that I'm going about operating, I could tweak that a little bit. I could change a few things. And as a result, I could feel better. I could get better results. I could be more impactful. I could be more effective. There's a real payoff for that. But if you are flying blind and it's right here and you never see it, then you're really at the mercy of your actions. So I take the assessment, we go over the styles, we go over what's called the drivers, and then we start talking about how those can show up, and they start making connections on ways that basically they could do things differently. And they start incorporating that with a different blueprint for how they manage and operate their business. And now I call it a powerful 1-2 punch. You're working on yourself while you're working on your business. You're improving your business processes and structure, but you're also improving your personal process and structure. And at the end of the day, because business is a reflection of the person, now what we're doing is elevating the business, elevating the person. So now we can enjoy success at a different level.
So the assessment gives you a jump start, and you have a fairly good idea of what's going on in their personality type or personality style, and then you'll be able to recognize it in your interaction with them, I guess.
Yeah, that confirms what I'm thinking, or it just lays a clear picture out. And then, like I said, once a person, because once a person understands, then they've got a game plan, right? Because everybody really enjoys, I've picked this up, really enjoys learning about themselves. Hey, tell me about me. Right? It's our favorite subject, right? But when you learn about yourself in a way that's like, holy cow, I've never heard this, I've never even realized or known about this, it's very eye-opening. And so now what you have is you have a language to communicate with yourself about. So now instead of beating yourself up, I always do this, or always turns out this way, or this or that, now you're like, okay, well, I see that this is probably a result of that. And so now it's a positive trajectory instead of it's a negative, I'm always doing this, I'm always doing that. It's now like, okay, I understand, and I can do something different. And that's how it elevates a person for different results, different interactions, and different effectiveness.
When you're dealing with a personality type that's an extreme, say, and I would think one of the most difficult ones is the extreme narcissist, because they know everything. They're at the very top of the heap. Does it get uncomfortable because you're letting them know some traits that they have that are really that they don't want to acknowledge?
Yeah, it's a good point. And let me take a step back on this, because one of the things that's happened in our society is, narcissism has this negative connotation to it. But clinically, what narcissism is that you believe in your capacity to do things. It's a healthy ego drive. Where it switches over to a negative is when you have zero empathy for others. So you can be narcissistic and believe that, hey, there's a lot of things I'm doing, I'm good at it. And as long as you have consideration and care for others, then that doesn't mean that you're the negative narcissist, right? So that's number one. Number two is, if you had a true narcissist, I would probably not work with that person, because number one, they probably don't ever feel like they need any help. And number two, it's going to be almost prove to me every day why I need to keep you in my life. And so a part of my process, Mark, is really doing an interview. I do a free interview, consultation, whatever you want to call it. And what we're doing in that is we're really finding out what's going on with the business for the business owner. And I'm really determining if they're ready. If they're really ready to take a step, because you can give it lip service, or you can be like, okay, I've really got to, because these things are happening. And if they continue to happen, I'm going to be in trouble, or that's not what I intended to achieve with my business. And that's unacceptable to me. So I'm not going to go down that path. And I got about 50-50 on that. But when people really decide they're ready, then they get results with what we do, because again, we're tackling the personal side and the business side. But back to the narcissist, you usually, at least my experience has been, they don't come looking for help because they feel like they've got all the answers. But you can have an egotistical person, right? And that may be more what you're talking about, that is they know everything. And a part of that gruff exterior from a psychological side is this protectionism. They're scared. They've had some negative experiences at some point in their life, that they've shown some vulnerabilities, and that was uncomfortable for them. So they're never going back to that. And what they've learned and how they've learned to interact with the world is to put up this really gruff front. And you've probably had occasions where you've maybe worked with someone like that. And once you get to know them, you realize, man, they're really a nice person underneath all that. You just got to get through all the blustering. And it lets you know that they're really trying to protect themselves. But usually they're not even aware that that's what they're doing from a psychological standpoint.
Mm-hmm. What about the type of person that can't seem to get off the couch and do what it is that they say they really want to do?
Yeah.
And how much of your time is spent as an accountability partner for especially for those types of people who can't seem to get motivated to do what they think they need to do? And how difficult is that? That would be really hard. By the way, that would be really hard for me.
Yeah, that's the toughest personality style. And those typically fall under what's known as a playful resistor. And playful resistor is basically someone that is really, when they're on, they are on, man. They're really good. But when they are off, they're completely off. So they have this kind of internal battle going on of either all in or all out. And so, as you know, with the background I have and the understanding, as adults, you're not going to force anybody to do anything they don't want to do. So this idea of coaches being this big bad accountability partner that makes everything happen, it's really a fallacy. Now, what you can do is you can keep people focused and keep reminding them of what they said they want to achieve, and question them, do you still want to achieve it? Right? Because personal motivation trumps everything. If you have someone that cowers to that, then you're probably looking at someone that basically is always going to be dependent on the coach. And from my way of thinking, I'm not interested in having a bunch of mini Dons running around out there. I'm really helping. I see myself as a pass through. I'm helping you pass through a point in your life, give you tools that you can benefit from so that your life and your business continues to thrive. Now, sometimes that takes 6 months, sometimes that takes a year. I've got some people I've been working with 2 or 3 years, but there's an end to that. But if you're in a coaching relationship where basically just the person just keeps coming back to you and you have to carry the burden for their success, that's not really in my perspective, that's not really a coaching setup. That's more of a independent kind of situation. But as far as handling that personality style, it's very challenging because they really are stuck. Is they want to do well, but they have this internal drag sometimes that stands in their way. And so helping them understand that the dynamic that's creating that from a psychological standpoint and begin to work against that begins to allow them to free up inside. Because really what's happening is they've internalized a parent ego state and their child ego state. And so they have that battle going on inside. Parent tells them what to do, and they say, you can't make me do what I don't want to do. And so that's really what's playing out emotionally for those folks. And when you begin to help them understand that, then they can take steps. But that's a very hard thing to overcome.
How often is it the case that the person is either doing something that their parent or someone else had aspired for them, or they're in their business too long, where they should have gotten out a long time ago, but the money's too good or it's too secure. So they really need, how often is it that they really need to move on and do something different? And can you get to that with them?
Yeah. I kind of had a personal example of that. There was an opportunity where I came in and I was president of the organization. And, the owner group was telling me that they wanted to get out. And what we found out is when I started making changes that actually were profitable for the business, it started to become scary for them. Now, they didn't understand that from an emotional standpoint. It was just change. And so they started digging their heels in. And so I learned a great lesson for that. There's a saying that, when a young man with money meets an old man with experience, the young man gets some experience and the old man gets some money. And that's what happened to me. And so, yeah, there are situations where people believe they want one thing, but once they start living it, it's like, whoa, that's not what I expected. And then there are folks that, hang on too long because, again, the fear is there, right? If I get out of this, what will I do? If I leave this, will I have not only the security, but will I also have, the prestige of being a successful business owner, being known in circles? So there's a lot of identity wrapped up in a business owner that they have to unwind when it's time to move on. And for some folks, that's very challenging. But it really kind of goes back, Mark, to what I was saying earlier on about why I build why my coaching practice is around the full business. Because if you are not ready to create an organization, then what I have to offer is not going to appeal to you, because what I'm going to share with you is processes and steps on how you back out of being in the center of the business and insert teams and process and people so that you basically have an organization versus a job that owns you. If that doesn't sound appealing to you, because look, I don't trust others, I'm afraid they're going to drop the ball and that's going to make me look bad, then, that will not be a situation that you're like, yeah, help me do that. And so if you're a business owner that gets to the end and all you've known is I control everything, I do everything, then it is going to be hard for you to give that up, because that is your identity in your life. Make
So
sense?
I would imagine that there are some very fulfilling moments in your life, in your work life,
Yeah.
as a coach. Talk about some of those examples, if I'm correct.
Yeah, you are correct. And the thing that, I'm like everybody else, I got to make money, pay for my life, my mortgage and all that. But the real payoff for me in this is really seeing folks turn that corner. And, it's twofold in turning the corner for me. Number one is know-how, understanding now the 5 major pieces of the business, how those come together, and then how to orchestrate and manage those so that you can have growth and productivity and profitability. That in and of itself, because that's such a big monster, right? I mean, there's no shortage of how-to books on how to run your business out there, right? But there's a lot of confusing information in that, and counterproductive as well as contradictory. So it's like, what do you do? So figuring out that big body of knowledge has been what I've been about for the last 27 years now, and sharing that with people where they can really get their minds around that in a streamlined way and see what that does for the business and just the relief. Because, on a basic level, what we're looking for is fulfillment and security, right? And when we feel like we're not doing well in our business, then we're not getting fulfillment, and we certainly don't feel secure, right? So when you see that and that turns the corner, it's almost like they get younger overnight, right? Because they shed this tremendous stress and anxiety that they have. So that's really awesome to me. And then, the mindset, because what I say is what goes on in the inside shows up on the outside, meaning what you say to yourself is going to impact your actions. And so beginning to see people turn that corner where they expand their belief of themselves and they expand what they believe is possible, and they have an experience of doing things differently and getting different results. And now that is their frame of reference versus some negative positioning or some limiting capacity. That's really, really rewarding. In fact, I have a client now, it's the longest person I've been working with. And, we have quadrupled her business now from where she started. And a lot of that really has to do with what she thought was possible then and how she sees the world today. And we have systematically stair-stepped her from being the business, doing the business, every aspect of that, transitioned her now into being more people and process oriented. And so along with that is her mindset had to shift. And so what she is now seeing is the capability to influence and impact employees and do things that impact her community and have a life at a different level that she dreamed of, but she just thought it was like, pipe dreams. But now it's like, man, it's not only within reach and she's living it, but there's more. And so, excuse me. So seeing people make that change, powerful, really powerful, because that's life changing and can be legacy changing.
Yep. The instance that I connect with that is in my former career, I was a mediator, and I provided a process that allowed people to reach agreement. And what I was doing was just being a referee and providing this framework. And then they were doing it themselves. Yeah. And at the end, when they reached agreement, I could, and I'm wondering if you've experienced this too, their face visually changed. You said people look younger, but their whole face would open up and brighten. And to see that and to be a party within that, but not to do that, just fostering it was just very rewarding, seeing people do it themselves.
Yeah, it is. And look, I mean, if you think about, the life of a business owner, I mean, if you just put it on paper, who's going to take that deal? Right? Who's going to sign up for
like having kids?
Yeah.
Who would make a list of all the benefits and drawbacks of having kids and still have kids?
That's right. That's right. So you think about all the pressures, you have people relying on you, you have your own image in there, your own ego in there, you're wanting to succeed, you're wanting to build and develop and deliver a lifestyle and opportunities and, open doors. And it's like, man, that's a lot of pressure, right? And to finally figure out this big body of work and how to basically navigate that in a way that makes sense, and that not only makes sense, but delivers results, and that you can do over and over once you learn it. Yeah. Why would you be stressed now? Because you put the puzzle together, right? You know how the back of the book reads now, right? But before, it's like, I don't know if I'm going to get there. And if I don't know if all the things I thought about and dreamed about are I can achieve and I can do, right? So that's why you have to work on both sides, is work on the, yes, you can do, and here's why, and work on your business. This is how to make this thing repeatable and consistent and actually transform it into an asset that produces for you versus a job that owns you. Powerful stuff. Powerful.
So if you could take all the knuckleheads, you may have already said this, but if you could take all the knuckleheads that you dealt with that were resistant to learning the lesson, and you could put them all in the same room, and if you could have 3 words of wisdom, 3 points that you would want every business owner to know that is just clueless, give us your best overall pitch about those lessons.
Yeah, I think that, and that's a really good question here, Mark, but I think that the thing that I would say is the most repetitive is this can-do attitude. And it's a double-edged sword, because it's like, if you don't have that initiative and you don't have that belief in yourself, man, you're not going to make it, right? But where that strength of your personality exists, there is a tipping point where that becomes your strength, then turns into a weakness, because now you get to a point where you're beating your head against the wall and you're not getting the traction. And what most often happens is we begin to attack ourselves. We're not good enough. We're not smart enough. We don't want it enough, all those things. So the point that I would say is my best advice is, embrace your can-do attitude, but be realistic that when you start hitting rough water, and it kind of exists rather, for a period of time, say 3 months, 4 months, whatever, take action, right? Don't keep beating your head against the wall. Go find somebody that has got some experience that can help you around that, because the time and energy that you expend will far outweigh even the highest dollar coach you could find. That's really the advice, because what most people don't get is, when you're in a taxi, the meter's running. When you're dealing with a problem, the meter's running. The challenge is you don't get an invoice for it like you do if you're hiring a professional to help you. The invoice comes later in the year, but it comes in terms of lower revenues, lower profitabilities, lower client numbers, lower excitement, lower payoff, lower success feeling, all those things, right? That's your invoice. But because it's dripped out and it's never aggregated, you don't ever really absorb it. I mean, I've had clients, Mark, I've talked to and say, how long has this been going on? And they'll tell me 2 or 3 years. And I'll ask them what they think it's cost them. And they're saying, it probably cost me anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 a year. Well, I got a $600,000 problem here. And the good news is, even the best coach out there doesn't cost $600,000. Right? So that is the advice I would have is, embrace your can-do attitude, but be realistic that when you start hitting some headwind and you do everything you know how to do within a relatively short period of time, it's not magically going to change. You have to take actions to cause the change. And that's where you go hire expertise that can fast forward your success.
And that person, and I think it's the flip side of the can-do attitude, is yes, you have control over yourself, depending on how self-aware you are, but you can't control your environment. You can't control all these external variables. And when we first started talking about the pieces of the puzzle, those have to be there. The timing, the tools, all sorts of things have to be there. So that's probably where we can-do people are fairly blind, is that we think we can do everything and affect everybody, but we're just not that powerful.
We're really not that powerful. We really aren't. And that's why it's really important to hone in on the things that you can control and make those as good as you can, because there is a universe out there, right? And not to get too foo-foo about it, but there are just things that you say, look, they're outside of my control, but I'm going to go and do the best thing that I can do so I can be most prepared, so that when opportunity presents itself, then I'm ready for it. There's this idea of forward regression. I think it's an engineering term. I'm not really certain of that. I may be wrong there, but basically it plays out over and over. And this is one of the things that helped me in my quest, because I struggled in business. In fact, I almost lost my first business. And what I found out is you can look at other people, and this is part of what the calculus that fits into what you were just saying about I can control everything. You look at other people, and from the face view, man, it looks like they got it all together. And you hear about business owners who have done X, Y, and Z and have gone to lofty heights. And the reason we hear about those folks is because they're unusual. It's not the norm, but we take that as, wow, that's what we should be doing. And then we start getting after ourselves. But the reality, if you could look into their story, you would see that there are stages that they've gone through where this forward regression happens. And so what forward regression means is you move to a point and you get elevated, and you're really, really good at all the components within that elevation. And you've got it. I mean, you look like you're put together and everything's, humming along for you. But when you try something new, when you introduce something new, what happens is all that expertise you have in one area, you begin to backslide because you don't have the expertise and understanding in that new space. And so you slide back, but as you begin to get comfortable, as you begin to know and understand, you begin to elevate your capability again. And now you progress to the point that it's time to fall back again. The lesson in that is that success is this constant moving up, moving back, moving up, moving back. But what happens each time is your highs are higher and your lows are higher. And so you're consistently increasing. And so if you can embrace that and know that, hey, I'm in this process of regressing, is the best path for me to get back to fluency, is that just to figure it out, trial and error? Or can I fast forward that by hiring expertise? And so that's what I mean. When you hit these hard spots, you're going through a natural progression of success, which is the forward regression. The challenge you have is deciding if you're going to extend the time that you stay unproductive, maybe unaware, less effective, or if you're going to fast forward that so you can be top of the spectrum in effectiveness, ability, and so forth. But that's a natural component, and that's where the can-do attitude can really step in the way of the natural progress of success.
If someone were to want to talk with you about possibly coaching them,
yeah,
and we're coming up on the end of our time here,
okay.
But tell us what your process is for someone engaging you. Do you offer a session? Just go into that a little bit.
So the first thing we do is we would have a little 5 or 10 minute, 15-minute phone conversation, and just really kind of understanding the lay of the land, what the challenge is. And, if the things that you're talking about or the person's talking about are the things that I'm familiar with solving, or I know how to improve, then if we both agree that, hey, this makes some sense to continue this conversation, and it's a mutual agreement process, then what I'll do is we'll set up a meeting where we actually have an in-depth conversation, and I'll send them a questionnaire. And basically in our meeting, we're going to dive into what's really going on, how it's showing up, the impact of it personally on the business, what their expectations are. And then we decide together if the things I've done, because I share that with them, if the things I've done are the things that they're looking for. And if so, then we engage. And, I don't have long-term agreements. I do a 6-month agreement, and then we go from there. The reason I do that is because if it's not working for you, I don't want you to stay. But number two is that nothing gets done overnight. So it takes a little time. So if they're not willing to put at least 6 months into making their business better, they're not going to be a good fit. They're looking for something that's unrealistic. And there's a lot of people out there selling, hey, we can get you from here to there overnight. And it's a bunch of BS, because there are foundational things that have to be put in place if you want continued repeated success. And so that's really the process. And then if we decide to engage, then we put together what our target is, what we're going to be working toward mutually. And now we've got some clarity on what we're doing daily and what we're moving toward. And so if anybody is interested in, getting my perspective on what's going on, and then exploring how I go about solving these business problems and helping them come along to be their most effective self from a leadership standpoint, then the best way to reach me is just by an email, which is don@successpath.biz, successpath.biz, B-I-Z. Or they could call my office. It's 502-589-3253. Again, 502-589-3253.
And I would imagine with COVID, your business has opened up geographically more than ever, I would think.
Yeah, I do a fair amount by Zoom. I still like meeting in person with folks, but if someone is, 2-3 states over, meeting in person every time is not an option. So yeah, we can be very effective over Zoom. Again, walking them through the process, giving them the steps, giving them the worksheets, and walking through those with them. I mean, we can do that by Zoom, but a lot of that is really just laid out in the program. Here are the steps you have to follow, and then we discuss that and what it means to them, so they have personalized coaching on their situation.
You typically meet with people weekly?
Yeah, that's the typical deal. We don't meet, I usually don't meet on the third week, because I give them time to catch up. I mean, business is still going on while they're trying to manage. I mean, it's basically, business 2.0 while you're still running business 1.0. So you got to have some understanding and flexibility in there. But what I say to folks is, if you don't do the 2.0 stuff, you'll always be in the 1.0 stuff. Business is hard. There's no doubt about that. But if you're not systematically beginning to do those things that will take you out of the hardness, then the best you can hope for is really pretty much what you're doing now. So it's really important, if you're wanting to, as I said, get out of that trap. And that's really what business becomes for can-do people. I'll do everything. And now that's grown so much, I can't handle everything. And so now I'm trapped. I feel stuck. And so getting them out of that by process is what my whole coaching program is about.
Well, Don, this has been great. And we'll put your contact information in the show notes.
Okay.
So people can reach you without having to go back in the video.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate this. And maybe we can talk further on some sort of regular basis, because I'm sure you're learning all the time, new things about business, new processes, having new insights from dealing with clients.
Yep.
And I found it a rich experience, and I hope our audience did too.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you and share what I do. I really enjoy what I do, and it's been a pleasure being with you. And it's, if I can help you in your business, or if you want a different perspective, by all means, reach out. I'm happy to talk with you. And if I'm not the guy who can help you, maybe I can even offer a resource for you. So thanks again for having me.
Great. Thanks. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.